This is Climate to Action, a CSUSM student podcast. I'm Alex Sandoval. I'm a third-year student and I'm majoring in psychology. Being a part of the Climate to Action podcast has given me more knowledge about climate change while also learning the ropes and being part of a podcast. We're here to amplify voices and explore solutions in the fight against climate change and to address climate injustice for all living things. We are committed to incorporating discussions on Indigenous knowledge in addressing the climate crisis and to provide a call to action in every episode. First, we'd like to acknowledge that our recording studio is located on the traditional territory of the Luiseño Payamcuicham people. CSUSM and its surrounding areas are still home to the 6 federally recognized bands of the La Jolla, Pala, Palma, Pichenga, Rincon, and Saboba Luiseño Payamcuicham people. It's also important to acknowledge that this land remains the shared space among the Cupeño, Kumeyaay, and Ipai peoples. Today's episode is focused on Climate Change 101. We've invited a CSUSM chemistry professor, Dr. Haleh Keshtkar, to talk with us about this topic. Thank you for being here with us today.
Hi, Alex. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
Tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, as you said, I'm a faculty at chemistry department. I'm a lecturer, actually, and I have been working at the chemistry department for the past 3 years. The main courses I teach are environmental chemistry and green chemistry. That's what my background is. I have a PhD in environmental chemistry. I did my master's thesis project on soil pollution and my PhD thesis project on air pollution. But I also teach general chemistry in the chemistry department.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about what got you interested in your field?
Yes, of course. When I was a graduate student at California State University, Northridge, doing my master's, I actually got interested in environmental chemistry because I took 2 courses in environmental chemistry. This was in the 90s, so it was the beginning of climate change. And as far as I knew, it was the beginning of environmental chemistry movement. But that really got me interested. I pursued environmental chemistry as the research project that I chose, and then I went to a graduate group at UC Davis. It was called Environmental and Agricultural Chemistry. It's actually a research group made up of a lot of different faculty in different departments: chemistry, atmospheric science, food science, toxicology, soil chemistry. So I did a lot of environmental chemistry after that. And as I explained, everything I researched on was also along the lines of environmental chemistry, air pollution. And then gradually in different classes that I took, I got more and more introduced to the issue of climate change. And then I always wanted to talk about it and teach it. And I'm so passionate about the environment.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for telling us a little bit about yourself. Since this is a Climate 101 episode, can you tell me and our listeners how you first became aware of climate change? I know you mentioned it was when you were in school back in the 90s. And what was that experience like for you when you realized what that was?
Well, as a scientist, we learn about how it works, and it's an evolving science. So we have actually gained a lot of knowledge over the past 30, 40 years. The original science of climate change is not new. We have known about it. We have known about greenhouse gases for the past century or so. But we have paid more attention to climate change over the past 30, 40 years. And that's because of the IPCC Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, all these international organizations that have brought our attention to the issue, and the fact that we have started seeing the impacts, and scientists have been telling us the urgency of the matter. So as a scientist looking at it, again, it was the urgency of the matter that we need to, as a society, as a global society, community, we need to change our ways to address this climate, this environmental issue, I mean. So my reaction to knowing about it was, as a teacher, I thought that I can increase the knowledge of others. I can give the information, give the background that's required for people to take action, hopefully. So I incorporated climate change in every class that I taught. And hopefully now we have a lot more students who are knowledgeable about climate change. And again, the more people in the movement of prioritizing climate change as a problem that we all need to address because it's going to impact all of us, the faster we can make a change. We need to have more people in the movement.
Right.
And the movement gets bigger when people are more informed.
Do you think it makes a difference if you mentioned it's a global issue, if, say, like one half of the world is tackling it, but the other half isn't, it's still going to be the same sort of magnitude of a problem?
Well, the problem, as you said, is global. Everybody is going to be impacted, but everybody is not really responsible for it. There are certain countries that are mainly responsible for the issue of climate change that we are facing today as a global community. So because some countries have been more responsible in creating the problem, they are also more responsible in addressing the solutions. So that's only because of the impact each country has had. But the other aspect is that there are some countries in the world that have more ability to address climate change. They have more financial resources. They have more knowledge. They have more research. So again, those countries have more responsibility in addressing the solution. So depends on who we're talking about, actually. Yeah. So those countries that are more responsible in creating the problem, and those countries who have more resources to address the problem, are definitely the ones that can make a bigger difference when it comes to the solutions.
Yeah, that makes sense. I understand that in conversations around the climate crisis, people sometimes confuse weather and climate. Can you tell our listeners what the difference is and why that's important?
Yes. Weather is what you experience when you step outside. It's the status of our atmosphere at any particular location for a short period of time. You can see that weather can change quickly. Last week we had rain. This week we have a sunny, nice weather. So change is within few days. Climate is the long-term weather patterns for any location, usually over a longer period of time, around 30, 40 years. So, for example, we know that here in San Diego, in Southern California, we are right next to an ocean. So is New York. So is North Carolina. But we see that our weathers are completely different. Here,
I never thought about that.
yeah, here um, our weather is usually dry. We don't usually have a very high humidity in the West Coast. But the East Coast, you go and the humidity is very high. That's because our oceans are different. Oceans are a big part of our climate system. So Pacific Ocean is a lot cooler because of the cooler currents that we have in Pacific Ocean. While Atlantic Ocean has warmer currents and it's a lot warmer. So what does that mean? A warmer ocean has more evaporation. More evaporation means you have more water molecules in the atmosphere. What is humidity? Humidity is presence of water molecules in the atmosphere. So you have more water molecules in the East Coast because oceans are warmer, and that completely changes the pattern of their climate. Again, here our climate means that we have low precipitation. We don't have any snow generally, and we have warm summers and usually mild winters. So over the long term, that's the climate for our region.
Thank you for that explanation. Many people also don't understand the difference between climate change and global warming and tend to use the terms in the same context. Can you help clear up that confusion?
Mm-hmm. Global warming means increase in average temperature of Earth's surface. Climate change is actually a broader definition of all the changes that we are seeing in our Earth system. Global warming is one of them, or the main cause of them. So as a result of increasing the temperature and also increasing the heat content in our atmosphere, we have increased the heat content of our oceans. So part of the heat that has accumulated in our Earth system is absorbed by our oceans. So our oceans are getting warmer as well. Because our oceans are getting warmer, we have more evaporation, and that means we're going to have more extreme precipitation. Sometimes we're going to have more extreme hurricanes. All of these change in precipitation patterns, sea level rise, melting of glaciers, all of those are considered signs of climate change. So these are all part of climate change. Global warming is only one aspect of climate change.
Is global warming, I guess, if you will, man-made? Or you know how we keep saying climate change is something we contribute to our environment? Would global warming also be, or that's just happening because it's natural on the earth to happen?
Okay. I think we can answer this question after we talk about greenhouse gases. It's easier to understand that way.
Perfect. Well, that segues us to the next question. When we talk about greenhouse gases, what exactly are we referring to, and how do they affect Earth?
Okay. You might remember from your science course in high school or middle school that most of our atmosphere is nitrogen and oxygen. In fact, 99% of our atmosphere is nitrogen and oxygen. And less than 1% we have other gases. One of the gases, actually two, I should say, two of the gases that we have a very small content, or the concentration is very small in the atmosphere, but they actually make a big impact, are carbon dioxide and water. These compounds are greenhouse gases. What does that mean? We all receive radiation or energy from the sun, right? The earth receives radiation from the sun. That radiation, part of that radiation is actually reflected back by clouds, and then part of that reaches the surface of the earth. That surface is land, oceans, glaciers, all of those are part of the surface. So they all receive that radiation. And they have to reflect that radiation back. Why? Because just imagine if something keeps receiving energy, it's going to explode. It's unstable if you keep increasing or accumulating energy in something. So our Earth also emits some energy back, because it wants to balance that radiation. The form of energy that Earth reflects is in the form of heat, infrared radiation, or heat as we know it. So this heat is emitted back into the atmosphere. And in our atmosphere, just imagine that we have these gas molecules going around, but very tiny, tiny parts in terms of concentration, tiny amount in the atmosphere are carbon dioxide and water molecules. They can absorb that heat that the Earth emits. The reason for that is their structure. They have these vibrations in their molecule that matches actually the vibration of the radiation that's emitted from the Earth. So they can absorb that radiation. But again, like any other body, they can't just keep absorbing radiation. They have to lose that energy. When they lose that energy, they lose it in all directions. So about half of that energy that they lose goes back to the space, and half of that is returned back to the Earth. So that is what greenhouse effect actually is. So greenhouse gases act like blankets. When you put a blanket on your body is also emitting radiation in the form of heat. The blanket doesn't have any radiation by itself, any heat by itself. The function is keeping the heat that your body emits in, under the blanket, trapping that heat. So our Earth actually has had carbon dioxide and water long before human interruption or human emissions or man-made emissions of these greenhouse gases. Those are part of our natural climate system, actually. The presence of these greenhouse gases is what has given Earth this very comfortable temperature range where life can exist. So we are thankful, we should actually be thankful to our greenhouse gases because they made our planet livable. They gave us this nice temperature range that we can survive all species can survive. So what humans have done is increase the number of blankets, let's say. So our Earth was very comfortable. It could balance that heat, keep the temperature at that really nice range when there was only one blanket. Before humans interfered with the process. But what humans did was they actually increased the number of blankets. We have increased the concentration or the amount of those carbon dioxide molecules in the atmosphere. So now we have a lot more carbon dioxide molecules in the atmosphere to absorb the heat that is radiated from the Earth and return that heat to the Earth. How? Well, it all started with Industrial Revolution. We invented steam. Not we, I mean humans invented a steam engine, and we also had access to fossil fuel. So fossil fuels are part of what we call carbon cycle. So carbon, which is an element in the periodic table, it's one of the most common elements in natural systems, definitely the one of the most common elements in any living species. So our bodies are mainly made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. The Earth moves carbon around in different parts of the Earth. And different parts are the atmosphere, we humans or living beings, the biosphere, the water system, our oceans, and Earth's crust. The living organisms, plants, animals that lived millions of years ago, they died, and the process of degradation, their degradation, actually happened under a lot of pressure and very high temperature in deep parts of the Earth's crust. So fossil fuels are actually what the Earth system made from that degradation over millions of years. And it's mainly carbon. They are mainly carbon, hydrogen. They came from living organisms. So the Earth stored most of the carbon in the form of fossil fuel in the Earth's crust. And there was always an exchange between the oceans, the Earth's crust, biosphere, and atmosphere of carbon. The main form that carbon is found in the atmosphere is carbon dioxide. And as I said, we need carbon dioxide in our atmosphere because it's what keeps our temperatures nice. So what we humans did was we took carbon from its storage, which was fossil fuel, at a very high rate, at a very high speed, and then we burned it and we entered carbon into the atmosphere. The Earth was able to keep the balance for a very long time, but then we kept emitting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. We kept increasing the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide actually has a very long lifetime. So pretty much every carbon dioxide that we have emitted since we started emitting carbon dioxide is still in the atmosphere, somewhere in the atmosphere. It actually can make it high up in the atmosphere, and there's a very good mixing of carbon dioxide. So the carbon dioxide that we emit here can actually end up somewhere else. We have a very even, uniform concentration of carbon dioxide around the Earth in our atmosphere. So basically, we disturbed that balance that the Earth was keeping. And now, because of those extra blankets, we have increased the temperature. That usually happens if you do that. If you are sleeping and you're very comfortable and nice, and then somebody comes and put 2 extra blankets on you, you get too hot, you get too warm, and you wake up. So that's what we have done.
So, with all this extra heat, what are some of the impacts of climate change that we're already seeing at this moment?
Well, we already talked about some of the impacts. There are some global impacts and there are local impacts. Global impacts, we can talk about, again, melting of glaciers that could impact many people around the world. The global warming is impacting people. It means hotter days. We have higher temperatures in summertime in many parts of the world. And we have the longer periods of hot days.
Mm-hmm.
For example, we can have extra month or hot days, or 2 months of hot days. Of course, that not only impacts humans, it also impacts agriculture. So we're already seeing the impact on agriculture and food production. We can have periods of drought. And again, we can have periods of extreme precipitation. Whenever we have precipitation, it could be faster, much harder. Like, again, we have seen in many parts of the world. We had flooding in the US last year. We had a very extreme flood in Spain last year, caused a lot of damage. We have seen increased hurricanes here in the US. One global impact is sea level rise. So, as I said, our oceans are warmer, and when they're warmer, they expand. And also, we have these glaciers in the Arctic regions, in Greenland, in Antarctica, that are melting as we speak. Those add, where does the water go when they melt? They add to the oceans. Those actually change currents in oceans, the change in temperature, the added fresh water into oceans. They change currents. So one impact that we see is the impact of the increased temperature in our oceans, the change in currents on marine ecosystems. And the impact on marine ecosystems can actually impact people who depend on those ecosystems for their lives. Sea level rise can impact communities that live around the coast. In fact, there are some people whose entire lives are going to be impacted by sea level rise. Those are the people who live in low-lying islands. So there are islands all over all around the earth that they are very low, what they call low-lying. It means that they're not really high. They're not in high elevation, basically. So as the sea level rise, then their whole entire island can actually go underwater. By end of century, we know that some of these islands are the islands of Maldives, for example. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're called heaven on earth.
Mm-hmm.
They're so beautiful. But unfortunately, those communities, those low-lying communities, are some that are going to be impacted uh, uh, by sea level rise. And as I said, their whole community can be wiped out. And these people are not responsible. You know, they're a very small part of the population on this planet. They're not very industrialized. They have not had a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. So they're not responsible. Yeah. But they're going to be impacted greatly, immensely by climate change. So the impacts, we have some global impacts and we have some local impacts. Here in San Diego, of course, we are going to see, again, more extreme, hotter days, longer, hotter days, extreme precipitation, flooding, which we have seen also, and drought. And drought causes wildfires. So locally, we are going to see some sea level rise because we have coastal communities, and our agricultural community is going to be impacted by increased number of hot days and drought, periods of drought. And again, wildfires are very close and vivid in our lives right now with the fires that we saw in Los Angeles going out of control and, impacting so many people.
Yeah, that was scary to witness.
Yes.
So what can we do to mitigate climate change? I hear that term a lot, but what does it actually mean?
Okay. So we said that we have increased the number of blankets.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean in terms of science? It means that we have increased the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. How? By emitting carbon dioxide from different activities and accumulating carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So to address climate change or to limit the increase in temperature, we have to address the sources. So we know that with climate models that we have today, and our climate models are a lot more sophisticated now than 20, 30 years ago, mainly because we have a lot more data to feed them. So our climate models can actually predict what would happen or how much our temperature is going to increase under different scenarios. So the scenarios are if we keep emitting carbon dioxide at the rate that we are emitting, or if we decrease our emissions by certain percentages. So we know that if we keep emitting carbon dioxide at the level that we are now, which is around 37 billion tons every year globally. 37 billion tons globally. If we keep emitting that, then our temperature is going to increase by um, 3, 4 degrees Celsius by end of the century. So far, we have actually increased our temperature by 1.5 degrees Celsius from 1880. So since 1880, which is around the time that we have started emitting, humanity has started emitting carbon dioxide, which because it was around industrial revolution. So the standard or the reference point is before or around industrial revolution. So around that time, 1880, our concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was about 280 ppm, parts per million. That's very small. That means 280 molecules of carbon dioxide for every 1 million molecule of air. So very small. Yes, carbon dioxide is a very tiny part of our atmosphere, but the impact is a lot. So 280, fast forward today, 425 parts per million. So that has caused our temperature to increase by about 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's about 2.7 Fahrenheit. And we are already seeing the impacts. So we know that if we keep increasing the temperature, we are going to see more and more impacts. And how would humanity deal with the consequences, with the cost, human cost, economic cost? All of that, all the scientists around the world, IPCC, they all agree that we need to limit this increase in temperature to around, well, the goal was to keep it around 1.5, but now that we are passing 1.5, we are hoping that we can keep the temperature between 2 degrees increase, 2 degrees Celsius increase from that reference level that we're talking about. So in order to limit the increase in temperature, we have to address the source. What is the source? Our fossil fuel that is being burned, and in the process, carbon dioxide is emitted. Where do we burn fossil fuel? Mainly, of course, it's a little bit different worldwide in different countries, depending on how industrial they are and what they use as their source of electricity. In our country, the main sources of carbon dioxide are transportation and power plants, electricity generation. So we have to address CO2 emission from these main sources. Of course, we also have agriculture, some greenhouse gases from agriculture and some from industrial processes. But our main sources are transportation and electricity generation. So by transitioning to renewable sources or sources of electricity that do not burn fossil fuels in the process, which means they are not going to emit carbon dioxide in the process of generating electricity, is a form of mitigating or reducing our emissions. Changing our transportation mode from internal combustion engine, which burns gasoline, which is also part of a fossil fuel, which also emits carbon dioxide, is another mitigation strategy. So mitigation means steps that we take to reduce our emission, to hopefully make sure that we can limit that temperature increase within a range that we can manage. We know that we have increased the temperature, and we know that we are going to increase the temperature, even if we stop tomorrow, because we still have this accumulation of greenhouse gases, mainly carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. But we need to limit it so we know how to manage it better.
Right. So, you talked about mitigation. What's the difference between mitigation and adaptation?
Okay. So we said mitigation is reducing our emission. But we know that we have increased the temperature by 1.5 degrees Celsius, and we are still going to increase, even if we stop emitting carbon dioxide tomorrow, which we all know that we are not. So adaptation is helping humanity, or finding ways for humanity to deal with the consequences of climate change, with the impacts that we are going to see in our communities. For example, in agriculture. So adaptation strategies basically try to increase resilience of communities and practices that we have that help our societies in different ways.
Hopefully, listening to this, people can incorporate that to our lives. What one thing would you like students to know or simply remember about climate change? Something that will stick with them and encourage them to tell others.
I know a lot of the news that we hear about climate change is not very positive. We hear about the impacts, and that can cause a lot of fear. Climate change is very scary for most of us, for all of us, actually. But I want everybody to remember that we need to think positively about what we can do to be able to address climate change. We have a lot of scientists, a lot of people who are working on solutions, and we actually have great solutions. We have technology on our side to help us address climate change, find solutions. We have a lot of knowledge about Earth's climate system. Many people around the world are working on solutions. So I guess my main message is not to allow fear be the main feeling that you get when you hear climate change. Yes, we only hear about the bad side of climate change in the news, but the good side, which is what I try to cover in my class a lot, is there are a lot of solutions. We actually have a lot of solutions, and we have success stories when it comes to environmental issues. We have had situations where global community came together to address a global environmental issue, and we were actually successful in addressing it. So this could be a lesson for climate change. And one more thing is we can all contribute. We are all part of the problem, especially us here in the US. The US is the second largest emitter of greenhouse gases. The first is China, of course. But historically, when we look at accumulated greenhouse gas emissions from the time we started industrialization, the United States is the first.
Wow.
So we are the most responsible country for the emissions, for the contributions to the problem. And we also have the best research, the best technology, and also financial resources to address the problems. So because the United States is the second largest emitter, and the first largest emitter is China. You know, the Chinese population is 1.4 billion. Our population is 330 million. So when you divide the total emission nationwide by the population, you see that we here in the United States, our individual emission is larger than a Chinese. It's also larger than people from many parts of the world. We're only behind a few countries, and none of those countries have the large population that we have. Those are all smaller countries, much smaller countries. So that means that our responsibility is actually very high. Each of us can change and lower our emission, and if we all do it, we can make a big difference. And our change, anything that we change, impacts people globally because we are one of the largest emitters.
Right.
So that means what I'm trying to say here is we can all make a difference in so many different ways. So my message is, one, yes, the news is negative, but there's also a lot of positive. And we have to focus on the positive if we want to make a change, especially your generation. And two, don't sit and think somebody else has to do it. We can all take steps to be part of the solution.
Yes, I agree 100%. And it's important for our generation, like you're mentioning, to take action. In every episode, we have a call to action. We like to ask our guests their thoughts about what our listeners can do to positively impact our community. What are some simple things people can do to help with climate change in the San Diego area specifically?
Okay. We talked about mitigation and adaptation. We can all individually take steps towards mitigation and adaptation. So mitigation was reducing emissions. Individually, what we can do is reduce consumption at any level. Everything that we use every day, not just our food. We mainly think about food when we talk about consumption. We mainly think about food. But everything, the clothes you're wearing, the makeup you use every day, your car, everything has used some energy for its manufacturing and production. And that energy emitted some carbon dioxide and used water. So we have a culture of consumption here. But a lot of times we don't really need everything that we buy. Again, from the food that we eat all the way to everything else that we use. So reducing consumption means reducing the energy used for the manufacturing of everything that you use, reducing the water used for the manufacturing, and reducing the waste. So reducing consumption at any level, that is not just local to us San Diegans, it's something that we all have to practice in this country. Reducing food waste. Food waste is the third emitter of greenhouse gases worldwide. If we set food waste as a country, it would be the third behind the United States. And we here in this country waste a lot of food, not just at the consumer level. We waste a lot of food at the supermarket level, restaurant level, farm level. But of course, as consumers, we can only reduce our own food waste. Composting. Composting is actually a very easy step you can take that can make a big difference. And our state has actually made it a lot easy for us, very easy for us, because all we have to do at home is to separate our compostable waste from recyclable and regular waste. That helps us in many different ways. Here in San Diego, we have landfills that are reaching capacity. So we need to reduce the waste that we send to landfills. And our waste management companies, I know EDCO has this beautiful facility to actually convert your waste, your food waste, food scraps, everything that was part of your food before, into fertilizer.
Oh, nice.
I took my green chemistry students to EDCO for a field trip last semester, and they showed us what they do with our waste, our compost waste. And they actually make fertilizer, as I said, and natural gas that can run their trucks.
Wow.
So they are using our waste to generate fuel for their trucks. And our part in this beautiful process is only to separate, to make sure that we separate our compostables from regular waste and make sure that it goes into our green bin. So definitely here in San Diego, where we have this opportunity to compost, we should do it. This is something that every household should do. And what else? So these are all mitigation strategies.
Mm-hmm.
Doing any of these, we will reduce our emissions, personal emissions, and definitely national emissions. But there are also some adaptation steps or strategies that we can do as individuals. Adaptation, of course, depends on the type of impact we're going to have in our community. We talked about the impact San Diego County is going to see. Reducing fertilizer in your backyard, reducing pesticide in your backyard are adaptation steps. Why? Because when you align your backyard better with the local ecosystem, you actually allow wildlife to thrive better as part of our local ecosystem. And we know that this extreme weather, this extreme heat that we're going to see, does not only impact us, it also impacts wildlife around us. When it comes to wildfires, we all are familiar with wildfires. I mean, they're so fresh in our minds. So we shouldn't forget it now that we don't hear it in the news anymore. Wildfires are a very serious and real part of San Diego community. So what can we do? We can change the vegetation around our houses to get them less prone to wildfires. All of us should be informed about what our cities are doing about wildfires. If they have any recommendations, we should try to implement those in our own homes. It doesn't really work if some homes get fireproof and some homes don't. We saw that a lot of times we have conditions that are not very controllable. We have high wind, very low humidity, and that means there's not so much predictability on how or where the fire is going to move. So it's very important that we move as a community. All of us keep wildfires very, very real in our minds. All our cities have climate action plans. So my recommendation is, especially for your generation, to go and see what their city is doing to address climate change in their community. One last thing I forgot, sorry. One thing that we can all do is change our diet. And I'm sure you have heard that before.
Yes.
So a more plant-based diet helps with climate change because our meat production emits a lot of the greenhouse gases that we have. That's a big part of our agriculture emission. And here in the US, we have a very large consumption of meat. I'm not asking anybody to become vegetarian or vegan. All I'm saying is to reduce. And again, if all of us reduce our consumption, our meat consumption, then again, all of that together will make a difference.
I love that. Well, it's reassuring to know we can all make a difference, even in our everyday choices. Haleh, Keshtkar, thank you so much for breaking all of this down for us. It's so important to understand the basics of climate change if we want to make a meaningful and positive change. And thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Climate to Action. Remember, whether it's through learning more, making sustainable choices, or advocating for change, every step counts. Keep taking action, and we'll see you next time. Want to hear more from Climate to Action, a CSUSM student podcast? Listen wherever you get your podcasts and follow us on our socials at Climate to Action. For Instagram and YouTube, that's at Climate2Action. For TikTok, it's Climate2Action. Visit for updates, behind the scenes content, and more. Finally, Climate to Action wants to remind you to take climate action. We challenge you to take the first step in your own climate journey. Like Professor Keshtkar suggested,
don't forget climate change when you don't hear it in the news, and be mindful of your environmental and carbon impact in every step you take and everything you do.
Let's transform our climate curiosity into climate action together. Remember, every small change can create a big impact when we work collectively. Until next time, this is Alex from Climate to Action signing off.